This is a Nikon FM2. It's a fully mechanical camera with a metal body, and one of the last fully mechanical cameras with a metal body that was made. It has a battery in this battery slot, but that is only to operate the meter. Okay, so on the top plate we start here with the shutter button. That's the shutter selection dial. That's the wind on lever, and just this thing over here, that is the double exposure button. Okay, that's the hot shoe over there. That's the rewind lever, and this button over here needs to be pulled, as well as this button to open the camera. So it's very hard to open this camera accidentally. Which flips out. Let's see if it flips out. Yep, flips out. I load the camera, as you see, to get the maximum number of exposures. On the bottom, the battery compartment, as I mentioned. This button here is to allow you to rewind the film, and these two connectors are for the motor drive. This over here is the lens release button. That's the place of the flash connector over there. Here's the depth of field preview lever. This is the other apertures closing and opening. And then this button here is the self-timer. When you depress the self-timer, the mirror flips up. So that's very useful if you want to take a shot that has no vibration in it. When you look through the viewfinder, at the top you see the f-stop reading, to the left you see the shutter speed, and to the right you see the exposure. That's pretty much it. Now, why did I buy this camera? I've been shooting the Minolta, which I reviewed the last time, for about 9 years, so I thought I'll get a brand new fully mechanical metal bodied camera, because even at that time they were becoming rare. Digital photography was on the horizon. I thought I'll get myself a fully mechanical camera that will last the distance. Was I happy with it? This is a spectacular camera. You can press it, doesn't give it an inch. It's solid. If you get one in good condition, because you'll never regret it. There was a period that I didn't use it for 4 years. Life happens, and I put film in it afterwards and shot with it, and the exposures were still spot on, and that's a testament to Nikon's engineering tolerances and the lubricants that they use in the camera. It's just fantastic. What did I learn? When it comes to slow exposures or long exposures, it's usually said, and it's in the books, that if you have a rangefinder like a Leica, a really well-made rangefinder, you can shoot down to 1/8 of a second with minimal evidence of motion blur in the background. Obviously, people walking through the frame are going to be blurred, but if you're using a single lens reflex, the mirror slap is too much. There's too much vibration and it will degrade the image. You can't use, say, a 50mm lens at 1/8 of a second and get a relatively sharp picture. You do a thought experiment. If you close both your eyes and try to stand still in one place, you don't have to stand on one leg, just on both legs, you'll find that your head will start to drift. Well, you shoot with your left eye open, and you focus in the distance on like a pole, and maybe several things. And then when you take the photograph, your head won't move. You can see a slight amount of blurring on the small letters, and there's a photograph taken at 125th of a second next door, and taken at the same time, quite sharp, taken with an SLR 1/8 of a second. Moving on to the minimum configuration, like if I could only have one camera and two lenses, what would they be? So obviously it would be the 50mm, which is always stuck onto this camera. This is a legendary lens. It's a 50mm pancake lens, f1.8. I have a lens hood on, not because it needs a lens hood, because I don't want to end up putting my fingers on the lens. Not only is it sharp, but it gives you a flat field, and it's rectilinear, so there's no barrel or pin cushion distortion at all. At f1.8 it's fast enough. This camera is so small, a lens hood dwarfs it. You can hardly see the camera behind the lens hood. Thing is, when you're a 50 shooter, occasionally you can't step far enough back, and you do want to get the whole of the scene in, or you want to get the whole of the building in. I felt I needed a wide angle lens, and the question is, 35 is the traditional wide angle lens, but what about the 28? And people usually say don't get a 28 and a 35, because they're pretty much the same, they say. More on that later. So anyway, I did a lot of reading and I got this. It's usually got a yellow filter on it. This is the AIS 28mm f2.8. This is a fantastic lens if you're close up to something like street photography. If you because you have to be close with a 28mm, you've got to be like 1 to 2 meters away from them, the person that you're photographing, and that's your foreground. This is an excellent lens. And so this, and plus this, that's my minimum set. So this is in the bag. See, having bought a 28mm, I thought, what would be nice, and so here we see gear acquisition syndrome in action. What would be nice is if I got a medium telephoto lens. This is the 105mm f2.5 from Nikon. It's actually a pre-AI version, but it is the latest formulation. There are two formulations, the Sonar, which is the early one, and the Zenitar. You'll notice that attached to this is a Nikon F. Now, I was looking for an AI or AIS version of this lens, but it was over $200, which was out of my price range for second-hand equipment. As it happened, at KEH there was this Nikon F. I've always wanted a Nikon F, but they're way too expensive. Like you go on eBay and it's $500, but this was just $100. And the thing about it is this photomic meter was inoperative. This one for just over $100, and together they were almost the same price as an AI version of this lens, so I bought it. Of course, this is not the lens that usually lives on this camera. The 28mm lives on this camera. Here's how you open the back of a Nikon F. And here's how you close a back of a Nikon F. It's important to have a rotary action rather than a sliding action. Well, in the new film era, you don't use a darkroom. I mean, I've had access to darkrooms at work. I'm an amateur photographer, but I've used film and cameras as part of my profession. But in the modern era, you do scanning. And I thought, oh, I could do that. I just need a macro lens, well, a micro lens. This, of course, is the 55mm, and it's for. And if you thought you got a DX body, you'd certainly be able to do 1:1. But after I'd bought this, I did the numbers and realized that having scanning is cheaper. I use it now and then just to, like if I'm testing a new emulsion and I want to see what it looks like when you're taking something up close, I'll use that. So one day I took a picture of an ibis flying overhead with a 28mm lens, and I thought, oh, that's a nice picture. I should take some pictures of birds with a 105. And usually they didn't come out that well because I'd be too far away from the bird. And the other thing you notice is it flaps its wings, and then you just got this little funny shaped thing. And I thought, what I need is a longer lens. So again, within my price range of about $100, I got this, which is a 200mm f4. Now, it still doesn't bring you close enough. If you really want to be very close, you need to be a 400mm or something bigger than that. It shows fringing, purple fringing. You'll see it if you have a high contrast image, like the white, a bird with white feathers, and then it's got some black feathers on the edge between the white and the black, you'll see some purple fringing. So, but for the size of photographs I take, about maximum is about 8x10. You won't see it. Just if you blow it up really big. So, but it's all right. I'll put some pictures in of Brisbane taken from a distance. One with a 105, which is really sharp. You can see it's a sharper picture than the 200. But the thing is, when you then expand the image on computer so that the buildings are the same size, even though the 200mm isn't as sharp an image, by the time you've blown up the 105 to the same size, it's not as sharp. So it has its uses. I can see it being used, certainly on black and white, you won't see any purple fringing. And you're taking a picture of a landscape or buildings in the distance, it'll work. It's not fantastic, but it'll work. Now, last, but I'm not sure that this is least. They say don't do this, but I did. This is the 28mm. This is an AI 35mm f2.8, and you're saying, well, you'll be scratching your head and saying, well, you just said if you have a 50mm and you get a 28, why would you need a 35? Well, I needed to answer two questions. One, did I prefer the 35 to the 50 or the 35 to the 28 in terms of the perspective in the picture? Now, a lot of people get their knickers in a twist about this, but a 50mm gives you the perspective you see with the eye. It doesn't cover the same field of view as the eye, but it's the same perspective. So if you look at the world and you put the camera up to your eye and it's got a 50mm lens, you don't see any shift in perspective. So, but when you put a 35mm lens on the camera or a 28mm lens on the camera, you see a shift in perspective. The size of the foreground to the middle ground to the background changes, and with a 35mm you have to stand closer than a 50, and with a 28mm you have to stand closer than the 35 to get the same size foreground. That's important to remember. So it's how much you want that image in the foreground to stand out from the background and the middle ground. So that's an aesthetic choice. And so people can say, well, it's pretty much the same image, the same size image. It's not, but they say pretty much. There's not a lot of difference. And if you're taking pictures of the horizon, yeah, you could say so. But if you're with people, then a 35 and a 28 can give you a different aesthetic response. So I thought I will get one like that. This thing is a legend in its own right. It's very sharp. It's about as sharp as the 28 millimeters. Don't get me wrong, it's not as sharp as the 50 millimeter. And it's got a rectilinear image, so you can use it to shoot buildings. There won't be any curves that you can see. So I'm happy with this. But I will make one comment. The bokeh on this thing is better than the bokeh on this one. So before signing off, I have to talk about the bag. So when I want to appear as a hapless tourist and, you know, people can feel sorry for me, I have this bag. It's just you can't even buy these bags anymore. It fits one camera and 2 rolls of film. And you can sling it over your back, over your shoulders. It's easy. And people say, just a tourist, an old guy with a camera, come from somewhere else, and so on. If I'm serious out there, and I want a lot more than 2 rolls of film, and I'm thinking of perhaps carrying 2 cameras, I use this. Now, there's enough space in here. It is a computer bag, but the inside is impermeable and it's padded. So if you accidentally knock the camera against it, it's not a big deal because it protects the camera because of the material. I just wear it across my shoulder like this, and everything is easy to get to. So that's the camera bag. Usually it has 1 camera and 1 lens in it and a stack of film. That's when I'm trying to look like an amateur photographer who's just bumbling around but not a tourist. Of course, the other things in the camera bag usually have a torch. I have nail clippers, lip balm. There's also junk. Like the last time I went to see a 3D movie. Chopsticks, because you never know. Instructions to access Twitter using SMS, which I would not advise anybody to do nowadays, and I don't do it, but that's how long it's been in my bag. And a multi-tool. Now, on multi-tools, this is a multi-tool, but in Australia it's called a Swiss Army knife. And because it has a blade on it, you have to be very careful about it. You have to, if you are found with one of these, the police will need to be convinced that you're using it as a multi-tool and not as a knife. Because the knives on these are long enough to be dangerous, and so the police can stop you and you will get into a great deal of trouble. I think that's covered the whole thing. If it isn't, I'll have to shoot some more. But thank you for your attention if you've made it this far, and I'll talk to you later. Bye. I see that I've sort of rambled and it says 25 minutes on the clock. Obviously that will be edited down, but so I'm going to speed it up to see what else is in the bag.